Most of us probably remember the first big news stories, national, international, triumphs, tragedies, that crept into our consciousness when we were young. One of my earliest childhood memories of a major national news event was the ugly violence that surrounded the integration of Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. To many of you, that's perhaps just a footnote in a history book. The year was 1957, and I was a boy of 9, living in Chevy Chase, Maryland, the son and grandson of journalists. I was shocked to see, as a 9-year-old boy, on the TV news each evening, jeering mobs of teenagers and adults taunting and threatening the first black students arriving at their new high school. And soon, the mobs were seen surrounding and beating black journalists covering the story. The lady sitting down a few seats at my right tonight, just behind the beautiful flowers, was also watching that horrifying TV news from Little Rock. But she, a young woman of 20, was watching in the newsroom of the Tri-State Defender, a small black weekly newspaper in Memphis, Tennessee, a few hours' drive from the Arkansas state capitol. Dorothy Butler had recently graduated from college at Lincoln University in Missouri, where she had studied journalism. She had been at this small weekly in Memphis just a few months. Her editor, Alex Wilson, had set out for Little Rock a few days before to cover this emerging national story. He had explicitly told his rookie reporter to stay back in Memphis. "It's too dangerous over there for a girl," he said. But when Miss Butler learned that her boss had been brutally beaten by a mob while standing proud and tall and refusing to run, she defied his orders. She and a veteran photographer at the paper drove the few hours to Little Rock. They arrived in time to report on the arrival of hundreds of National Guard troops called out by President Eisenhower to protect and to escort the new students to Central High School. Black journalists covering the civil rights struggle in the South were like war correspondents in a combat zone. Facing danger in Little Rock was Dorothy's first act of courage in a long life of courageous acts, some personal, some professional. 5 years later, in 1962, after a stint in Chicago with Jet magazine and a master's degree in journalism from Columbia, Dorothy Butler was a second-year general assignment reporter at the Washington Post. The Post sent her to Oxford, Mississippi, to report on black citizen reaction to the tumultuous integration of Ole Miss University by student James Meredith. This civil rights milestone was marked by extreme violence by angry segregationists, their anger often directed against the journalists there in Oxford. Approaching Oxford in their car at dusk, Dorothy and a colleague were pulled over by menacing men in a pickup truck, waving guns. They were told to stay out of Oxford. They told the men they were heading to Jackson to see a relative. Quick thinking. They were allowed to pass. They continued to Oxford that night, finding safe refuge at the home of a black family. No hotel rooms to be found in Oxford that night. Well, Dorothy Butler's coverage of her time in Mississippi surrounding those events in Oxford ran on the front page of the Washington Post back home. One of the civil rights leaders she interviewed on that trip, the fearless Medgar Evers, was assassinated a year later in Jackson, outside his own home at the age of 36. There are so many reasons Dorothy Butler Gilliam is being honored tonight. For her work in the African American press before she came to the Post as its first black female reporter in 1961. And for her work in the 1970s in helping to shape the Post's innovative new lifestyle section of the paper, which was dubbed simply Style. She was a reporter and assistant editor of that seminal section. And she is being honored tonight for 18 years of writing a widely read, provocative column in the Metro section of the Post. Twice a week, 1,500 columns in 18 years. As a young newspaper journalist in Washington in the 70s and early 80s, Dorothy Gilliam's column twice weekly in the Post was must read for me as a reporter. But Dorothy Gilliam was not content to simply do great journalism herself. Dorothy Gilliam made it her life's work to mentor and promote the careers of young journalists of color. She passionately believed that diverse newsrooms produce better journalism by portraying America more accurately. She played a role in organizing or leading virtually every minority journalist development program in our profession, then and now. She also taught journalism at Howard and American universities in Washington. The W.M. Kiplinger Award has been given over the last 40 years to numerous people for whom and with whom Dorothy worked over her long career, starting with the legendary Chicago publisher John H. Johnson, founder of Ebony and Jet magazines. One of Dorothy's closest Post colleagues in the 60s and 70s, and her tireless compatriot in mentoring journalists of color, was editor Robert C. Maynard. He was honored with this citation in 1989, along with his wife, journalist Nancy Hicks Maynard, with whom he bought and revitalized the Oakland, California Tribune in 1983. And one of Dorothy's early mentors when she first came to Washington in the 1960s was reporter, columnist, and TV commentator Carl Rowan. He a winner of this Kiplinger Award in 1997. Oh, and a few other colleagues from the Post you might have heard of. Ben Bradley, Katharine Graham, David Broder, and her former editor in the Metro section, Bob Woodward. All of these previous winners of this award. In this pantheon of our profession, Dorothy Gilliam has a rightful place. The title of Dorothy's fascinating autobiography, and if you only read 2 or 3 books this year, this should be one of them, is Trailblazer. And that single word captures the essence of this woman's remarkable life. Please welcome this year's winner of the W.M. Kiplinger Award for Distinguished Contributions to Journalism, Dorothy Butler Gilliam. You gotta lift this wall. When I get it closed, right? A few
Good evening. Thank you so very much for this award. I really, really appreciate it. And I echo the phrase I've heard from so many tonight, how wonderful it is to be in a room full of journalists. It has just been so long since I have been retired that, I had forgotten how wonderful journalists are. And so it's great to be here. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about, my own personal evolution. It'll be less than 3 or 4 minutes. And, when I became a journalist, early on, diversity was just part of my raison d'etre. Diversity was just so, it was so clear to me how important it was. And so one of the reasons it was so important was that not only did journalism make reporting and make stories and make all of those kinds of things come alive, but it also inspired people to really, in communities, to really work, to really listen, to really, be a part of the larger U.S. Diversity was a part of that. And I can remember, for example, when I first came to the Post, when there were no people of color, as has been stated, it was just a matter of time before, by using all these methods of diversity, we were able to expand that and to really, I think, make such a difference, not just in the lives of the people who were a part of the story, but also a part of this city and a part of this nation. And so I'm very, very pleased to know that tonight, as we're being honored also for diversity. Diversity is so important still in this country, even though it's being attacked on a daily basis. We know how important it is. One of the things that makes this so important to me is that we want to have a nation that is inclusive. We don't want a nation that is exclusive. And that has been, I think, the wishes of so many in this country, despite what the political landscape looks like today. And of course, diversity is very much a part of that, very much a part of making that real. When I look around, I see that when the things we write about, those stories spur people to action. It makes people want to do something. It makes them want to be better. It makes them want to make the nation better. And this is what I think is one of the important aspects of diversity, because as these stories are written, as they cross racial and ethnic and other lines, there is a certain coming together that is involved, and I think that's of crucial importance. When I look at my own career and I look around me, I think of so many people who are almost like citizen activists, because they read something that you have written or something that I have written, and they take action as a result of that. And I've seen that happen so often in my time as a journalist. And I remember, for example, the way When I wrote stories or columns about the fact that at the response of people who knew that in George Washington and Mount Vernon, they had just taken all the bodies of the formerly enslaved persons and literally dumped them, in the same graveyard. There had been no attention paid to the fact that they had given so much service and to what a great price had been paid. But when I wrote about that, there was a group of women in Virginia who just became a cause for them. And they went to work, and they now have, a beautiful memorial for these formerly enslaved persons. And, it's just an example of what can be done and what will be done, if we write about the kinds of things that we think really touch people's hearts. And diversity is one of those things that really touch people's hearts. And just in closing, I wanted to just share, how important it is, it has been for me to realize that, journalism is a field that, doesn't give once, it just keeps giving. And I think some of the awards that have been announced tonight, where so much work went into writing some of the stories and the series that are being talked about, this tells us that, this is a profession that we just must continue to let grow. This is a profession that we must continue. In fact, we must recognize that it is one of the most important professions in the world, because this is the way that people learn about who they are, who their neighbors are, what this country is about, and of course the people who make a difference, who make that happen, are people like you who are in this audience, as you have made it, very, very clear. So I hope that, each of you will make sure that diversity is a part of, your institutions. I know some of you have already done that, and, I salute those of you who have. But for those who have not, I hope that you will really consider the importance of making diversity a part of, of your institutions, a part of your own life, and a part of what can be really the future of this nation. So I thank you so very much for this award, and I would like to just thank again to Mr. Kiplinger and to just everyone who has been so very, very kind and so very, very generous, both in their words but also in their actions. Thank you very much.